Almost every year I rewatch that show because I love that universe.
But it's kind of popcorn. It's stuff that's like, okay, that was cool, but you don't hang on too much of it.
They could always find new solutions, find new ways to explore those characters.
Welcome one, welcome all to ScreenRant's Challenge My Goat. My name is Liam Crowley and I'm your shepherd through this journey of superlatives as we crown some of the greatest topics in film, television, a little bit of music, entertainment as a whole, history. Today, we are crowning the greatest superhero television show of all time. Sticking with this television theme, shout out to Todd Gilchrist for filling in for me last week as I was over in India on some business and Wi-Fi was not cooperating. So shout out Todd for shepherding that conversation. It was a joy to watch as a viewer for once. Our expert today to go in the superhero realm of TV is ScreenRant TV Deputy Editor, Marcelo Leite. Marcelo, thank you for coming on Challenge My Goat. What makes you qualified to declare the greatest superhero TV show of all time? And who is your pick?
Thanks, Liam. Thanks for having me. I've been obsessed with superhero shows my whole life. I grew up watching cartoons, superhero cartoons. Those were my getaway to the comics. I started with TV shows before I started actually reading superhero comics. Both live action and animated stuff, but especially animated shows. We'll get into that later, but I would say that animated shows have significant advantage compared to live action TV shows when it comes to comic book adaptations. But those were my introduction to the world of superheroes, and they were actually my introduction to the world of entertainment. And I would say that the fact that I work today with entertainment and being ScreenRant's TV deputy editor, it has a lot to do with the fact that I watched a lot of superhero shows growing up, the different eras, the early 2000s, the Smallville era, the Arrowverse era, then the Daredevil, the Netflix Marvel shows, and now we have this premium era with the Disney Plus, the big budget TV shows that take place in the same universe as the MCU movies. So I kind of got to follow these different eras of superhero shows and always engaging with the fan base and reading theories and always engaging a lot with those shows and how they relate to the comics, what they do differently, what they try to keep from source material. So it's been a huge part of my life, and I'm excited to defend my favorite superhero show, which I believe is the greatest superhero show of all time, Justice League Unlimited.
Marcelo, we are cut from the same cloth. You talking about your origins with Justice League Unlimited made me flash back to my childhood because I love that show. I'm gonna let you talk about why it's so great though. I am just sitting back and moderating this conversation. And as you were bringing that up, our challenger was rolling his eyes a little bit. I think we might get contentious on this one. Our challenger today is ScreenRant's senior author, Mr. Ben Gibbons. Ben, what makes you qualified to challenge Marcelo's GOAT?
So I think quite simply, I'm an addict, and I'm an addict for superhero content, superhero TV shows, superhero movies, superhero everything. You know, whatever it is, I will consume it and I'll go towards that. I was born in 1994, and as I was growing up, I grew up in this kind of golden age of superhero media where we had all these different movies and TV shows that were released. So things like Justice League Unlimited and other things, all those came up as I was growing up. I was a perfect target audience for that. But at the same time, I was also able to look back and see a lot of these different movies and TV shows that covered DC, Marvel, and everything else. And so I was just immersed in that culture. And since then, I've been fortunate enough to make it into a career. At this stage, I've written around 2,000 articles on a lot of that has been superhero content. And it's what I'm desperately passionate about. It's what I love, and I can spend hours and hours talking about it. So I think I'm ready for this.
Two experts on today's show. Guys, you both have crazy knowledge bases going in, and I'm very, very excited to see how you poke holes in each other's arguments. So we're going to start by getting into laying our foundations. Marcelo, kicking off with you, you have 2 minutes to tell me why Justice League Unlimited is your GOAT.
I think we can all agree that television is the best way to tell superhero stories. The very nature of the medium with the serialized stories from the comics. So I think we can all start from here that TV shows are the best way to adapt comic book, especially superhero comics. With that said, I would say a lot of people would also agree maybe that Batman the Animated Series is one of the best, if not the best, superhero shows of all time. But Justice League, especially Justice League Unlimited, always felt to me like an expansion of what Batman the Animated Series did. Imagine if you have the same quality, the same level of passion, some of the same creators involved with Batman the Animated Series, now working with the extended DC universe, not just with Batman, but with the entire Justice League, and not just the usual founding members of the Justice League, but also different versions of favorite characters, also characters that had never appeared on television before. So imagine if you could take everything great about Batman the Animated Series and then expand that into a show that included dozens of characters, dozens of heroes, dozens of villains, in a way that maintained that same level of quality. So if we have a show like that, which is Justice League Unlimited, how can I not say that it is not the best superhero show of all time? It is everything that a comic book adaptation should do. It tackles a lot of different characters. It treats everyone with the same level of respect and care. It's not just a show about Batman and his friends, which I know that TV executives would love to do that, just have a show about Batman and his friends. But Justice League Unlimited delivers something much greater than that. It wasn't just a show about Batman or even just about Superman and the founding members of Justice League. It was a show about the DC universe, and it lived up to the expectations.
Almost 2 minutes exactly. I didn't even have to count you down, Marcelo. Very well laid out foundation to kick us off. Ben, you're going to break my heart in these next 2 minutes because I love this series so much. But again, it's the nature of the beast. It's the nature of the show. You have 2 minutes to tell us why Justice League Unlimited is not the greatest of all time.
Listen, I respect Justice League Unlimited. I think it was great as a core concept, but the reality is a show that covers so many different characters, so many different topics, so many different things is going to be unbalanced in some ways. It's going to be a spectacle and an event more than it is a consistent, solid story arc. So in 3 seasons, 39 episodes, it goes all over the place, right? You introduce a ton of heroes, a ton of villains, there's a ton of different things that go on, but at the end of that, you're kind of like left with a bunch of things that seemed nice and seemed good, but it's kind of popcorn. It's stuff that's like, okay, that was cool, but you don't hang on too much of it. That story doesn't kind of stand with you and stick with you in the same way that something that's like a consistent story arc might. You mentioned comic books and how obviously serial format like a TV is something that benefits that. I absolutely agree. And with that, you want kind of like a consistent story arc. You want something that follows from beginning, middle, and end and covers a lot of different things. DC Justice League Unlimited, it covers a lot of things, but I would say too much. It covers too many things. There's too much going on, and ultimately, it's entertaining, but it's not like up there in terms of quality. If you'd made the argument for Batman the Animated Series, I think I could have got behind that a little bit more. I'd still disagree, but I think Justice League Unlimited, I think we're on different pages entirely.
Okay, well, if someone is appreciating a consistent storyline, something that's building up for multiple episodes, I'm privy to your challenger pick. It's starting to make sense to me. Tell our audience what your challenger pick is, Ben.
So for me, and people might say it's recency bias, but I think it's been a couple of years now. I think there's room to kind of leave that out. My pick is Loki.
Whew, the stage has been set. Justice League Unlimited versus Loki, 2 of my favorite shows of all time. Not even just superhero shows in general. So get to have these 2 clash here. It's like making me choose my favorite kid out here. Marcelo, I want to kick it back to you. Are you familiar with Loki? What's your reaction to the challenger pick? And why is Justice League Unlimited a hair above?
Definitely. I must say, I was not expecting such a recent show, but I do agree that Loki is an amazing show. It might be my favorite of the Disney Plus MCU shows. What I really liked about Loki is that it didn't just feel like an extended MCU movie split into a few episodes, like some of the shows have felt. It was its own thing, so I really appreciate that. I understand why you would pick Loki, but going back to Justice League, I do agree that the show covered a lot of things, a lot of different topics, a lot of different characters, but I also think that that was one of the strengths of the show. Going back to Batman the Animated Series, it was very much a Monster of the Week structure. It was beautifully done, but it was a Monster of the Week structure where each episode we would get a different villain, and they would sometimes reinvent the villain from start to finish. Like Mr. Freeze was a very different take on the character, and it's probably the best take on the character to this day. And Justice League Unlimited sort of did that, but they still had some overarching storylines, some arcs that you could follow from beginning to end across, if not across the whole show, at least across a few episodes. It's interesting because Justice League, like the original series before Justice League Unlimited, every single arc was a 2-part episode. So like every episode would end with to be continued, and then you get the conclusion of that arc in the next episode. And that was interesting, but Justice League Unlimited managed to still tell ongoing storylines without using 2-part episodes. They were able to tell like do an entire adaptation of a major comic book arc, for example, for the Man Who Has Everything. They did that in one episode. Like they were able to do a lot in just 20 minutes, and they still had some extended arcs. For example, in season 2, we had the Cadmus arc that was not only a conclusion to that season, but also a conclusion to the entire DCAU in a way, because we got characters from Superman, the animated series, coming back. We got plot points that were established earlier in Superman, the animated series, finally being revisited at the end of Justice League Unlimited Season 2. We had Epilogue that brought together the Batman Beyond timeline with the return of Terry McGinnis, and we learned a lot about that. We also learned about what happened to characters from Batman, from Batman the Animated Series at the end of Justice League Unlimited Season 2. So it was like, it brought everything together. Even though they were dealing with a lot of characters and storylines, they still had time to connect the entire DCAU before shared universes were cool.
Yeah, shared universes was going to be one of my talking points, because you could argue you need to have a little bit of MCU knowledge base going into Loki in order to fully appreciate it. But I do also kind of see the perspective of it working as a standalone show. Ben, what I want to ask you, based on everything Marcelo just laid out, is that Justice League Unlimited, I look at that from a ground level, and I would say it thrives as that adventure of the week kind of story. But Marcelo brought up some great points, that there are some overarching narratives that go throughout the season, go throughout the whole series as a whole. With Loki, 6 episodes a season, you could argue on the surface, it does feel like a 6-part movie each season. Tell me why that's not the case.
Well, firstly, I just want to say thank you to Marcelo for the first half of his argument, where he spent a lot of time complimenting Loki. I think all of that was way justified. All of that made perfect sense. I loved it. Things started to go haywire after that. I didn't really hear it, maybe cut out, but whatever. For me, Loki. So yeah, absolutely. You could say that it's kind of like a 6-part movie. Sure. I don't know where, I guess I don't think that you're saying that detracts from it. But I think where I bring it up is because TV has evolved so much, and in the streaming era, it almost feels like, because we're in such a binge culture, sometimes a 6 to 10 episode arc can feel like 6 parts or 10 parts of a movie. Well, back in the day when it was a Saturday morning cartoon, you're almost resetting your brain every single week. So sure, there can be an overarching narrative, but there is a reliance to go into that adventure of the week. Loki does have some of those adventure of the week episodes in season 1 when they go to that one planet that's getting destroyed. I'm blanking on the specific name. That feels like a filler episode, so to speak. But Loki as a whole, I could sit down in one day and feel like I got a whole movie out of it, which to me, the reason why I bring that up is that that's not the argument. It's not best limited series. It's not best, anthology series. It's best TV show. And is it operating by those TV show rules? Yeah, I think so. I mean, listen, TV has evolved. Things have changed over time. I don't agree, and I don't like everything that's changed with TV. Obviously, the longer gaps between seasons is one of the biggest, I think, detractions that exist for Loki. The first season came out in 2021. Second season came out in 2023. And that was like a year and a half. No, it was 2.5 kind of years gap in between. So it's a long time. It does kind of take away from it. There's a big gap in between. Whereas that Saturday morning cartoon feel that you get for Justice League Unlimited, it's 3 seasons that played out in like 2 years. So it's a lot of things that kind of go back to back. That's nice. It's warm. It's cool. But for me, I think it also reflects kind of like the maturity of the story. It reflects the changes and the development that go on in the story. So yes, it definitely exists in this world of being like a 6-part movie, and then it plays out over those 2 seasons, so 12 parts. But I think ultimately having that like through line, having that incredible kind of story that is there, I think it makes it all the more powerful. I think it makes it resonate more. I think it makes every episode count all the more, rather than it being kind of like serial adventures. They have their place, but in terms of like best TV show of all time, best superhero TV show of all time, I think Loki has a clear edge.
And I will say with Loki, it did benefit from that weekly discussion, because even though it is on streaming and we pick and chose what time of day we watched, most people were appointment viewing with it because they knew if they didn't watch it on the day, they were going to get it spoiled, and then they'd be missing out on some of that theory discussion on social media. That's not something we get very often anymore. That was something that was so prevalent back in the day with weekly television, where you had one chance to watch it. It's on broadcast TV, and if you miss it, you better hope that you set your DVR. Marcelo, before we continue, I've been wanting to ask you in particular all show about this question that I said before we started recording, your nostalgia check. I need to know your origins with Justice League Unlimited. What was your first exposure to this show? Who were you watching it with? And how did that impact your perception of this product?
I started watching Justice League Unlimited as a kid, probably like 5 or 6 years old, on local TV. Like you mentioned, you had to watch on the day, because if you missed that episode, good luck. You're going to have to wait for the entire show to finish, and maybe a rerun to watch that episode again. So yeah, it did play a big role in my childhood. Like I mentioned, it was one of my first exposures to the superhero world, even before I started actually reading comics. Even before I started watching superhero movies, I would say the cartoons, Saturday morning cartoons play a big role in my childhood. So there's definitely an element of nostalgia involved. But I will say I've been rewatching the DCAU almost every year. Like I do a marathon. I start with Batman the Animated Series. I do chronologically. So I do Superman the Animated Series. I do Static. I do Project Zeta, then I do Justice League Unlimited, and then Batman Beyond. So almost every year I rewatch that show because I love that universe. And every time I finish watching Justice League Unlimited, I'm like, okay, so it's not just nostalgia. It's really a great show.
Okay, I'm glad you clarified that, because for me, I don't believe I think I watched a couple episodes live, but I got the DVDs, man. I was at Newberry Comics making sure, and they would only put like 4 episodes on a DVD, so I would have to get multiple volumes of multiple seasons. That one episode with Green Arrow and Supergirl and Captain Atom, I forget. It was just like the hodgepodge. I loved that kind of like just assemble a bunch of random people. That's that kind of adventure of the week stuff that I loved. Ben, for you, since Loki's more recent, I feel like there's less childhood nostalgia involved. I don't know, maybe if you were introduced to the character at a younger age, but still, walk me through your first time watching Loki. Did it click back in 2021 when it was first airing that this was on the precipice to be in that GOAT conversation?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, for me, I was already in the world of like entertainment journalism by that point. I was already, watching shows, not just to kind of watch and consume it, but also to kind of like see why it's great, to understand more about it, and to kind of like dive deeper into the stories. And so it really did benefit from what you mentioned a minute ago, where there was that weekly conversation. You go online, you go anywhere, and people were talking about it. No one had that when they were watching the DCAU as kids. We didn't go to the water cooler with our kids at school and talk about this stuff. So there's definitely some nostalgia and longing for that kind of like weekly release thing, and that doesn't happen all the time now. We get a couple of shows that are that weekly release, and I think it always benefits from it. But in terms of nostalgia, yeah, it doesn't really tie into nostalgia. I guess it can play into it a little bit because it is a continuation of that MCU, and again, for me, I grew up with that. So that began coming out in 2008. It wasn't long until we saw Loki introduced, Tom Hiddleston's Loki introduced in 2011's Thor, and then we see him in 2012's The Avengers as the main villain. So this is building on that story. So there are ways that it connects to a younger me. But yeah, I think when I was watching it, it was just kind of mind-blowing how good the quality was. It was something that was a cut above a lot of the other things that were already released in terms of the other 2 kind of MCU TV shows. And then on top of that, it was exploring a new medium for the MCU as Marvel Studios, right? We already had Marvel TV shows. There were some greats and some not so greats, but this was something that felt distinctly different. And it really did just, it blew my mind watching it.
Yeah, even though it is a recent pick, I will say there can be a little hint of nostalgia in there, only because I think it's fair to say the MCU in 2025 has dipped a bit in quality from the golden age of the Infinity Saga, but that year of 2021, WandaVision, Falcon Winter Soldier, into Loki, and then Hawkeye as well, I think all of those shows are great, but Loki and WandaVision were like a cut above. So sometimes when I look back on 2021 Marvel, I'm like, man, we had it so good. Even with the movies, Shang-Chi, Spider-Man No Way Home, like there were some great releases that were happening in 2021. And sometimes based on, lesser quality Marvel shows we've gotten years since, we might look back at that time with a little bit more rose tinted glasses. But that is only my perspective. I'm not projecting that onto you, Ben. It sounds, everything you said is pretty fair there. One thing I want to throw back to you before we go back to Marcelo, I am one of those people who season 2 to me felt like they made some changes. Obviously the Jonathan Majors variable, pivoting away from Kang, basically kind of retiring He Who Remains as a character within that show, when it really felt in season 1 like they were going to catapult him into Avengers The Kang Dynasty, which obviously is now Avengers Doomsday. When you watch season 2, because as someone who covers all of this stuff and you knew all of the behind the scenes stuff that was happening, did that at all impact your perception of the narrative that was playing out?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I was worried about the future of the MCU. I was worried about what was going to kind of come up and how they were going to kind of replace storylines and change things up. Obviously, now we have more of a clear idea. Rather than Avengers the Kang Dynasty, where we're looking forward to Avengers Doomsday, and things are very different. The landscape today is very different from even when we were watching it back then. But I guess I was kind of looking at it and trying to see how they would deal with that. And there was a little bit of a concern of like, would the quality dip massively? Because I had a lot of contenders. When I was thinking about this question, best superhero TV show of all time, I thought about a lot of different shows. I was thinking about Heroes, but the quality dips massively after a couple of seasons. I was thinking about Misfits. The quality dips massively towards the later seasons where the entire cast changes out. I was thinking about a lot of different shows, even Smallville. You mentioned Smallville, and later seasons just didn't hit in the same way that the earlier ones did for me. So I had a big concern that the quality was going to be very different. The story was going to be very different and things were going to be changed. But I think the writers and the team behind that show did incredible work with adjusting, taking the blows, and then making it still be an effective story that feels continuous. I've watched the entire thing over the weekend. Obviously we were talking about it being good for binging. I sat my wife down, we both sat down, we watched it, and we were hooked. And we were gripped throughout season 1 and season 2. I think revisiting it and recognizing those parts of it that really do hold through, even now that we know things have changed so much and stuff changed between the production for both. The story is really more centered on Loki than it's centered on anybody else. And they don't need to rely on the villain character as He Who Remains to kind of carry it forward. As much as he plays a big role in both seasons, Loki's story is the thing that's truly impressive and the thing that blows everything else out of the water, and everything else is just complementing that, building on it and creating something that is unshakable. I think it's really impressive what they did.
Okay, well, one of my concerns for your argument has just been squashed because that was very, very well said. Marcelo, to throw it back to you and to kind of go in a little bit of a different direction, something that everyone always argues whenever we do Challenge My GOAT on any different topic, a big factor for them as to why something is the greatest is its ability to be influential, is its ability to, this thing came out in the 1970s, but everything that came in the 5 decades since has a little bit of this thing in it. So I would love if you could speak to Justice League Unlimited and its ability to be influential to the future of not just DC stories, not just superhero TV stories, but superhero stories in general.
Let me take that into a slightly different direction. Do we have any other superhero movies or shows that have been such a great interpretation of the DC universe that is better than Justice League Unlimited? Has a TV show or a movie or a DC movie done something that is greater or bigger or better than what Justice League Unlimited did? And I'm not
to be fair, the bar is kind of low.
I get that. I'm not trying to throw shade at the live action DC movies. I'm actually a fan of most of them, even the controversial ones. I do like almost every interpretation of the DC universe on the big screen. But with that said, the fact that DC has struggled for so long to get a proper shared universe in live action on the big screen tells a lot about how difficult it is for a show like Justice League Unlimited to do what it did, because the comics have so much baggage. We have so many characters involved, and that's what I think Justice League Unlimited has an advantage over Loki, because like you mentioned, Loki is about Loki. So it's easier for the show to handle just one character. They did that very well. They treated Loki very well. They explored different sides of the character with the variants and all of that. But Justice League Unlimited had a mission that was much more difficult, because they had to tackle a lot of different heroes and a lot of different villains. We opened the show with a Green Arrow center episode where Oliver has to kind of find a balance between protecting the little guy and fighting like the gods and monsters from outer space. And that's like the first episode of a Justice League show focusing on a relatively small character back then, Green Arrow. That was before Arrow was a thing of the show. So it showed that they were not reliant on Batman. And there was sometimes that Batman would just disappear. We also had the bot embargo during that era where Warner Bros. Didn't want to let the show use every single Batman character, because the Christopher Nolan movies had plans for them. There were other animated shows in development, so we didn't get a lot of Batman-related content in Justice League Unlimited. The Joker disappeared, Nightwing and Batgirl, they never appeared. We also had in season 3 Aquaman vanish because they were developing a live-action Aquaman show. And even still, with all the limitations, Justice League Unlimited still delivered something that recent movies have struggled to deliver. And even going back to the MCU, I would say that Justice League Unlimited is a better interpretation of the DC universe than the MCU is a interpretation of the Marvel universe. If we're talking about the best version of the Marvel universe, I'm going to say that the animated show, The Avengers: Earth's Mightiest Heroes, is my favorite interpretation of the Marvel universe, even more so than the MCU. For similar reasons.
I'm starting to see that nostalgia bleed through, I don't know, man.
Because the animated shows like Justice League Unlimited, even though they have some limitations, like I mentioned, the Batman characters that they couldn't use, they were not limited by budget. They were not limited by actors. I don't know, if Ben Affleck no longer wants to play Batman, what happens to the DC universe back then, going back to the Snyderverse? They didn't have that problem in Justice League Unlimited. They could always find new solutions, find new ways to explore those characters. And going back to, just to close my argument in terms of influence, that show introduced a lot of people to a lot of DC characters that some people would never know about these characters, like Huntress, even Green Arrow, Captain Atom, Black Canary, a lot of characters that for comic readers, of course, they have always been big, but for casual viewers, people who were not consuming comics back then, they were introduced to a lot of characters, and that's also why whenever you ask someone to name like their favorite Justice League lineup, they will mention Jon Stewart as the Green Lantern. They will mention probably Hawkgirl, even though we never had that same formation in the comic books. So that goes to show how impactful Justice League Unlimited has been. Even now with James Gunn's universe, I know that people were asking Hawkgirl's actress if she was going to have a relationship with Jon Stewart, and she was like, "But that's a different Hawkgirl. That's Shiera." So it goes to show how impactful that show has been.
All right, well, we're winding down in the debate section, but Ben, I need to give you a little chance to respond, because that's a pretty big statement from Marcelo that JL Unlimited is a better interpretation of the DC universe than the MCU's interpretation of Marvel Comics. But again, I want to stay centered on this argument here of Justice League Unlimited versus Loki. So again, I'm giving you the chance to respond, but don't stray too far from the topic at hand.
Oh, so many things to come back to. My goodness. Okay, it's a challenge to try and kind of wind it all in, but I will. I'll do that. I'm going to start a little bit broad and then we're going to wind in. It's going to be like 1 second of being broad. I think it's a wild accusation to say that Loki had an easier time of setting up this story and building a story around one character than what Justice League Unlimited did with a ton of characters. I think selling a ton of characters is an easier sell for people than selling one character, especially a villain and a minor villain, a character that wasn't a big deal. He came in 2011's Thor, and then he was there in 2012's The Avengers, but he wasn't that big a deal for a lot of these different things. You know, he was kind of a background character. He's not really the hero. And again, this is a different version of the character altogether. So what we're trying to sell is a variant of a villain that was kind of like not a big deal and swatted in the first movie. You know, the Avengers dealt with him. His story was kind of just about trying to redeem himself, and then he died. So they're trying to sell a series from a character who died, who wasn't existing anymore. I think there's just like a whole lot of mental hoops that you have to jump through to get there. But then if we're talking about things like the MCU talked about how it was great that the Justice League Unlimited was able to kind of build on all these unfamiliar characters. If you want to talk about that, man, the MCU is the prime example for that. The MCU, from the foundations, Marvel didn't own most of its own properties. Characters that were really popular belonged to a bunch of different studios. So Marvel had to go into the MCU building out these characters that were less popular iterations. So they had characters like Tony Stark, who I think is the MCU's single greatest story arc. But Loki, I think, is a close second. Incredible story arc that plays out. And most of that exists inside the bounds of Loki, those 12 episodes. This is a different version of the character that exists. It's not the same guy that we saw who carried on and then resolved things with his brother and sacrificed himself to Thanos. This is a different version of that character. He's someone whose growth was stunted and ended at the end of the Avengers in 2012. This guy picks up a cube, he teleports away, and then he gets picked up by the TVA. This is a different version. We're buying into this story, and I do think while it kind of like, you know, you'll get a richer experience from watching other shows in the MCU, I don't think it's reliant on that in a big way. And really, if you watch just the Avengers, you've got everything else that you need. So if we're talking about a 12-part movie and those 12 episodes, let's make it 13 parts and have the Avengers. You've got everything you need for Loki. And then over the course of that, you've got this character who transitions from being a villain who literally takes over people's minds, is trying to like get people to bow down and worship him, is just desperate for attention, doing all these crazy things. And then he becomes just like, it's a spoiler for Loki, but I assume anyone watching this is obviously going to know about it. He becomes essentially the savior of the multiverse. This story is kind of foundational for the multiverse saga. If you didn't watch anything else in the multiverse saga, this is everything you need to know to have a multiverse experience with variants, with Kang. You know, despite him being thrown out and not appearing anywhere else, he gets his story, he gets his time in here, and Loki beats him. And we get an ending that is just spectacular. So I think, yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know how to hold up your side of this, but yeah, I'm elsewhere.
These are two very well argued arguments, man. I said at the beginning that this was going to be like choosing between my favorite children. Fortunately, I'm not making a choice. We leave that up to the audience because, oh my goodness, you guys both are making really good points that are honestly apples and oranges. It's a matter of preference at the end of the day, but we are reaching towards the end, so I want to give you each 60 seconds to bow tie your arguments, toss in a curveball, attack the other, whatever it may be. Marcelo, we'll start with you. You have 60 seconds left to tell me why, Loki. You just put Loki so much in my brain, damn. You got Loki.
I think you decided. I think maybe we
Did I
have
just
something.
show my cards a little bit? Damn, Marcelo. you got 60 seconds left to tell me why Justice League Unlimited is the greatest superhero TV show of all time.
Loki told one great story. Justice League Unlimited told 39 great stories. Each episode was its own spectacular event. Whether they were a standalone episode or something connecting to a larger arc. It tapped into different eras of the DC universe. It dealt with a lot of different characters. It treated each one of them with the same respect. It gave everyone their time to shine. It treated heavy topics that even current adaptations try to avoid. Like in Clash, the late Dwayne McDuffie asks the question like, should superheroes get political? We have Shazam clashing against Superman over Lex Luthor. So the show was ahead of its time. We don't have another superhero movie or even another superhero show that treats its universe with that same care. It's the greatest of all time.
Well argued closing statement. Ben, coming back to you. 60 seconds left to tell us why Loki is the greatest of all time.
I thought we were here to argue the greatest superhero TV show of all time. You mentioned that it tells 39 great stories in Justice League Unlimited. Wonderful. But if we're talking about one great story, as you rightly declared, Loki delivers an incredible story. Across 12 episodes, if you want to expand it out a little bit, we can throw in the Avengers. But otherwise, it is one consistent, beautiful story that builds on this incredible character, has all these other incredible pieces that are built in and baked in, and just sets the MCU off on the right track. Whatever happened after that with the Multiverse saga, we don't have to talk about right now. But when we're talking about greatest superhero TV show of all time, we've got Loki on the table, and I think it earns its place.
Under 60 seconds to wrap it up. That's a confident man right there. And he's arguing also, too, you never mentioned this in the argument, Loki's the god of stories at the end of the show. So you could almost argue you're arguing with the god of stories himself. Anyways, guys, you watching at home, if you disagree with our GOAT selections, that being Justice League Unlimited and Loki, drop them in the comments below and let us know why they are your pick for the greatest superhero TV show of all time. Drop them in the comments below over on the article specifically at ScreenRant.com under our Challenge My GOAT tab. If you're watching this podcast within the article, all you got to do is scroll down to the bottom and leave your comments there, because if you leave a well-argued comment, I'll read it on the show next week. And last week, we argued for the best TV show. So I have a couple comments here to shout out from our audience. First, Dwayne says, "You're insane," to our expert Graham Gutman, who argued his pick for the greatest TV show of all time, because Dwayne goes with Breaking Bad. He says Breaking Bad was hands down the best television show so far in all television shows combined. From the beginning of time until now, it's going to take a mighty foe to knock Breaking Bad from its perch too. Again, the Breaking Bad, one of the best TV shows of all time. It's really hard to declare the greatest in these topics, man, because different
That's
genres.
a great character story, Breaking Bad, too. You know, it like follows Walt Whitman. It's great. Great character story.
Walter White, not Walt Whitman. That was
sorry.
no, but hey,
I watched the Dead Poet Society the other day. Yeah.
A cheeky reference, though, because as we know, when he gets found out by Hank, Walt Whitman. Oh, WW, Walt Whitman, Walter White. Good little twist at the end of Breaking Bad there. We also have a comment from CLP who says, "The Leftovers is one of the greatest shows ever." The Leftovers was who Graham was arguing for greatest of all time. I've watched it 3 times, very near the top of my list, but how should I compare that to 6 Feet Under, to Sons of Anarchy, to Breaking Bad, to Better Things, to The Sopranos, to The Magicians, to The Good Place, to The Expanse, to The Americans, to China Beach? All I can say is these shows bring me back for repeat watching, either to the entire series or to individual episodes. They make me feel something for the stories, for the acting, for the craft behind them. I never forget them, but I can't rank them. One of the first times we've ever read a comment on the show which isn't declaring a GOAT, which is just declaring that the topic is way too broad to crown one individual entry. And I honestly do echo that, because when we get broad with these topics, man, it's really hard to stack up a Breaking Bad against a True Detective, against a Friends, against a How I Met Your Mother. Like, all of these shows serve different purposes. I'm shouting out my biased picks, by the way. I don't think anyone is going to argue for How I Met Your Mother being the greatest show of all time based on how the finale ended. Marcelo and Ben, thank you so much for joining me on Challenge My GOAT. This was, again, I've said this too many times, and I swear I mean it every time. This was one of the most even clashes we've had on this show, because, again, you guys are arguing such different topics. They're the same topic, but still, it's an animated, almost Adventure of the Week anthology series versus a 6-part arguable mini-series, but one overarching narrative that fits in like a puzzle piece to a greater cinematic universe. I can't choose, and I'm glad I don't have to choose. Marcelo, before we get out of here, thank you again for joining us. What do you have going on at ScreenRant, and where can the people find you online?
Thanks, Leah, for having me here. I would ask that everyone goes to check our TV section on ScreenRant to read our great articles from our TV team, including the ones written by Ben, who's one of our writers. You can also follow me on Blue Sky, Marcelo Leite 120. That's Marcelo Leite 120 if you want to take a look at what I'm saying there. I also share our TV stories there. And I'm excited to see what our audience has to say about their favorite superhero shows. I'm expecting we'll get a lot of comments maybe about Daredevil that we didn't mention here. But yeah, I'm interested about that. And go check my GOAT article about Justice League Unlimited to see more of my arguments about the show and to agree or disagree with me there.
Amazing. Yeah, Daredevil. Wow, good show. There's going to be some feisty comments in this article for Daredevil. Ben, thank you as always for joining us. Where can the people find you and what do you have cooking up over at ScreenRant?
Yeah, so listen, you will find plenty of articles. You search up Ben Gibbons ScreenRant, you'll find plenty to read there. As I said, nearly 2,000 articles, a lot of them about superheroes. You'll find something on your favorite topic. Other than that, if you look on social medias, I'm at Benjamin Blogs or Benjamin Blogs 1 for the platforms I couldn't get Benjamin Blogs. But yeah, I'm a little all over the place, but yeah, you'll see me around.
Awesome. As for the realm of myself, Liam Crowley, you can find me on all socials at Liam T. Crowley, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, most active on Instagram. And as for what you can watch by the time this podcast goes out, I have interviews with the cast of Eternity and interviews with the cast of Hamnet. I'm very proud of both of those conversations. They're two of the best films of the year. Hamnet will be all the rage come the Academy season, and Eternity, I don't think it's going to sneak into some awards nominations, maybe for best costume design, but in terms of just a good, warm-hearted story, a good rom-com, especially this time of year, it's definitely worth the price of admission. Longer term, I had a trip to India recently where we got to celebrate the upcoming S.S. Rajamouli film, Varanasi. There will be content coming out from that. I can't say what that content is. It's under embargo, but stay tuned in the coming months, or whatever it may be. Stuff is coming out. It's really sick. I'm really proud of it. Lots of good stuff in the pipeline. Lots of good stuff to round out the year at ScreenRant. It's been a wonderful year for all of us here on this team. I think we've got to do a lot of great coverage, and I'm not going to reminisce about the year too much. We still have a couple weeks left. So anyways, if you're watching this right now and it's the day before Thanksgiving, I hope you all have a lovely Thanksgiving if that's the holiday you celebrate. If not, I hope you have a lovely weekend, and we'll catch you next week when we argue for the best Christmas episode of television of all time. That's going to be a fun one. We're getting narrowed down. We'll see you next week.